Squatchin Holler. Please like and subscribe.
And hit that bell.
Hey, y'all. we finally got everything going. I got Neoma a link like a minute and a half ago. Heather's got my phone. She's going to join us tonight. And wow, there's like 100 messages so far. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to bring Heather in and then Miss Neoma. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
I feel so honored.
Sorry about that.
I feel honored. I get to be on with Miss Heather.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I've been asking her for a long time, and she's been nervous about it. She goes out with us, and you know, she's not as scared as I am a lot of times. But,
bring it on.
So thank you, Miss Fan, for coming on. Fellow Tennessean. Are you from Tennessee originally?
No, I'm a Yankee.
Okay.
I'm actually what you call a Yankabilly.
Okay.
Which is, my parents were from Arkansas, and my older brothers were born there, and all of my aunts and uncles and grandparents. And then in the 1950s, there was a boom of business in the factories up in the Quad Cities in Illinois, and my whole family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them, they moved up there. And so I was born up there, but I was raised by Southerners in the North.
Right.
And I remember growing up thinking that everybody around me in my neighborhood was really weird because they did things that made no sense to us whatsoever. Like, you would go to their house and you'd be invited in, but they wouldn't feed you. They wouldn't. It was like, and you come to my house and I didn't care. My mom wasn't even cooking. She'd get up and start making dinner, and you know, and we'll come and sit at the table. And so I have all of the Southern values with the Yankee accent.
Well, I'll know a little bit about that. When Saturn moved in 30 minutes from us, we had a huge influx of people moved in from Ohio, Illinois, all over. And most of them had lost their jobs, plants shutting down and all that. And a couple of them were in the same situation you were, grew up in the South, their family moved up north, kind of the same situation. And I've heard them talk about coming back, and a lot of people had issues with it was a shock to the system how slow we were here, but you know, everybody was just relaxed. And you know, my buddy, he moved in here, and one of my best friends to this day, and we're driving down the road, and two things he had to learn. I was waving at everybody. He said, "Man, do you know all these people?" I'm like, "No, I don't know who those people
What you do when you pass the car.
This is what you do." And then the one time we pulled up, we were in high school. There's about 4 of us in there, and David said, I'm buying, which we're talking about Coca-Colas and stuff like that. And he said, I'm buying. And okay, what do you want? I want a Coke. Me too. He goes in, he brings out 4 Cokes. I'm like, whoa, what's this? He said, you said Coke. No, Harry drinks Sundrop. I drink blah, blah, blah. That's what we call everything. So
in the Midwest, it's called a pop.
Yes.
But for reasons that I'm not clear on, we always called it a soda. And I still call it a soda. I or a sody. You want a soda?
Yeah. Cold drink. Go to the fridge and get a cold drink out of the Frigidaire.
Out of the Frigidaire. That's right. We had all kinds of refrigerators. I don't remember ever owning an actual Frigidaire, but every one of them was called a Frigidaire.
my grandmother had 2, and they looked like 57, 58 Chevys with all the chrome. I wished I had one and could customize it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wondered why things were called the Frigidaire. Y'all, everybody, thank y'all for coming on. We're just winging it. We're going to talk about stuff, and I'll get to the weird stuff. But it's yeah, it got so where I was hearing so many different words. I looked it up. There was a pop cola that actually was a long time ago, and that's where that came from. And then the soda fountains, where people would go get their drinks and everything. And my dad, he passed away in 2022, and one of the things he told us that I never stole much at all in my life, never took what wasn't mine, but one time he felt bad about it. He was a kid, and the guy that came around with a wagon, like on Green Acres, the guy that come around and would sell stuff and trade eggs, and all that. He said him and his brother snuck back there with a bottle opener, church key, and
Wow.
it cracked open some of them and stole those drinks, and he felt bad about that his whole life. But thank you for coming on. You made a smart decision, seems like.
Holy cow. Has it been a crazy couple of days?
Goodness.
Bobby, yeah. We called it's a sofa, a couch, a Davenport, or a settee. I remember my grandma always saying, "Come sit on the settee." And I thought, sit on the settee. Okay, we'll try that. But anyway, let me tell you, yesterday I had every intention of going to the LBL. I have aquatherapy in the afternoons on Friday, so I wasn't going to get there till last evening. And they were already, anybody that knows Wayne Tetherow and the Manimal Research Group, they were all there at the LBL, and I was supposed to be there with them last night. Well, by the time I got done, I couldn't go to therapy because there's lightning strikes in the air. They won't let you get in the water. And by the time I figured out I wasn't going to get to do that, we had storms coming at us. And so I decided that I wasn't going to go up to the LBL because look, I camped when I was younger, and I camped for all of my life when I was younger. I don't need to camp now. And as you guys know, when I do on the rare occasion camp, I bring a sleeping bag and I sleep in my vehicle.
Yeah.
I don't lay down on the ground or anything like that. And so the storms were coming in, and I thought I'll wait and go in the morning. That's all there is to it. So Wayne sent me a message, and I think he's kind of upset with me. He says, "Well, where are you at?" And I said, "Well, I'm not coming tonight. There's bad storms out there." And about 8:30, I sent him a message, and I said, "You guys need to take cover. Those storms are coming right at you."
Yeah.
And he sent me a message back, and he said, "Well, Miss Neoma, I don't think you're right. I think those storms are going to go around us. That's what we're hoping anyway." So I went on the Weather Channel, not the weather, it's weather.com. It's their website. And I zeroed in on Colson Hollow because that's where they were. And I cut the radar up to 915, which put it right over them at that point. And I screenshotted that, and I added a red arrow with big black letters U and another red arrow with big black letters time pointing. And I was like, all righty then. And I sent that to him, and they never responded back. And I thought, oh my gosh,
he's probably running.
And then the worst part, to make it worse, my older son lives in Russell County, Kentucky. That is just east of Somerset and London, Kentucky. Right. And those towns were basically eviscerated last night.
Right.
And he quit sending messages to me at about 10:30. So I sat up till almost 3:00 this morning, waiting for a response from Wayne and waiting for a response from my son. My pseudo son is Wayne, and my real son is Bear. And I sat there and waited for them, and neither one of them responded back until finally at 7:30 this morning. My son said, they all went north of us. We're fine. And then at about 8:30, Wayne sent me a message, and he said, well, he said, we made it through the night, but it was a pretty wild one. And he sent me a video of him sitting in his truck, and it was just pouring down rain. Excuse me, I'm not even sure. It might have been hailing. And then he sent me a picture of a truck. And I said, that's what I said to you.
Yeah.
A tree fell on one of their trucks. And so he said, and Miss Neoma, I don't think you're going to get down here anytime soon, because all up that road, and you guys are familiar, that's where we camped together last time, a year ago or so.
Yeah.
That road is not the best road anyway.
No.
And he said there was trees all across it. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get down there. At noon. Now, I went to bed at 3:00. I woke up at 5. Probably woke up 2 or 3 times in between to check my phone. I'd been up all night. I was up all morning. I laid down to take a nap. I wasn't even laying down maybe 20 minutes, and I get a message, hey, they cleared the road. You can come. So I get up and I get ready, and I had to go get gas, and I drive all the way up to the LBL this afternoon. I get to the road to go down to Squatchin Holler, and there's 2 barriers there, barricades. I'm on crutches, I'm lame. So I can't get out and move the barricades. I don't have phone service. I can't call Wayne to come up and move them for me. Right. And so I had to drive all the way back to the other side of Katie's and call him and say, hey, I can't get in there. And I think I upset him again, but so I came back home, and otherwise I'd be trying to do this from the LBL tonight.
Well, that's a long drive back north.
Yeah, well,
is it not?
I think it's shorter from where I live. I live about as far into Tennessee from Kentucky as you guys live into Tennessee from Alabama, okay. I think. And I think it's shorter if I go up and then just go straight across Kentucky on 68, okay. And then down because Squatchin Holler is about halfway either way. Yeah. If you come up from Dover or down from Katie's. And so it's just shorter for me to go that way. And I'm more familiar with it. I've made that drive that way so many times.
Well, we can't rib you too much for sleeping in the car, because we had the tent beside you, but it got cold, and we had a cabin about 20 minutes away. How long did it take to get there, Heather? Was it
from the cabin or from
the campsite to the cabin? It wasn't that far, but it took a while to get there.
Yeah, probably like 35 minutes.
Yeah, and from some of the stuff we saw on the road on the way back, I had all the lights on. she said, "Why you got all the lights on?" I said, "Because I want to."
He was standing eating cereal at the back door, just staring. I'm like, "What are you doing? I think I see something out there."
It was that was some trip, and what we always joke around, like we almost got God. I don't know what. I've told it a few times.
Yeah.
And Heather, tell your version, and we'll get to other stuff. But
yeah, because we've all heard our versions.
Right.
We want to hear your version.
Tell your version from like when you first heard it and everything that happened until it bumped into Neoma's car and left.
Well, I mean, of course I could hear everybody at the fire, and they were all chatting, and I'm laying there freezing to death, by the way, shivering, still in my clothes, of course. And Honey, our dog, was in between me and Roger. And so I remember she growled. She just for a slight second. And of course, Roger laid his hand over on her, but I didn't really hear it. He was closer to the back of the tent, so I didn't hear that. But then everybody was like, "What's that? What's that?" from the campfire. So, and lights are shining, going everywhere. And I'm like, "What the world?" And so, that's not long after that. He said, "Are you ready to go to the cabin?" I said, "Absolutely. You don't have to ask me."
Yeah, I told Billy, Billy, you can use the heater, the bed, everything. We're gone. But Gary Spikes, I asked him, he's probably in here. There's Gary right there.
Yeah.
He says
there he is.
they found a track behind our tent in that old creek bed back there the next morning. And whatever it was, did not care about anything hearing it. It wasn't trying to be quiet. I thought at first I thought it might have been Wendell sleepwalking, but it definitely wasn't him.
Well, I was sure that it was some man going to relieve himself in the woods, which I thought was kind of odd because, the bathroom is just right there.
And I thought the same thing because you never know when somebody, has a few to drink, it might go the wrong way. That's what I thought at first. But when I heard that congestive breathing, I've never heard that before. Yeah. I've been in the woods all my life. I've been around farm animals. It was not a hog doing how a hog does. It didn't sound like a hog at all. It creeped me out big time. But anyway, we made it through it. And I asked Cam about it. He said, no, once he goes to sleep, he's out. So we could have, he could have woke up and we'd all been gone. But
I'll tell you what really bothers me.
What's that?
I almost, just as a joke, reached over in the seat and pulled on my headlights.
Oh.
And then I thought, no, I'm not going to embarrass some guy like that.
Well, see, you couldn't hear it probably in the car, but I know didn't you really hear.
I heard something moving around. I don't know I guess, now that you say that, I guess it was probably breathing that I was hearing, but whatever it was, it did bump into the car. I mean, I felt it. Well, not like huge, but
it was, I don't know how it didn't touch the tent, and it went straight, and then it made a turn at your car and went back into the creek bed. So
yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Wendell says, I found the tracks and Billy was with me. Okay.
Yeah.
It was right behind there. There was a lot of strange things. I mean, you know more about the place than I do. I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
And I was in chat the other night. I haven't heard a lot of your encounter stories. Like, I know there's one that has to be like terrifying because I was there when y'all had the conversation. Are you going to be on the show with, they're coming up in a few weeks about the feelings of Bigfoot? Yeah. And I'm going to be on it too. So,
oh, cool.
I have people that haven't experienced some of this. How can I put this? I think they mean well sometimes, but it can strike you the wrong way if you've lived with this all your life and you've like held it back and now you're putting it out there. And then, so anyway, we'll talk about that on that show, but,
well, I do want to say this, and I won't go too deep into it, but I was, interviewed on another show about 18 months ago, and it's a pretty big show. And he just released another video. I mean, it's not the first video in 18 months, but he happened to release a video the other day that he used a segment of me telling of my encounter. Now, I talked to him for 3 hours that day, and my encounter was actually a minor part of the interview. But I noticed that he put that encounter in this most recent video. He did a compilation video and it covered it. And of course, because the show's big and there's a lot, I mean, it's not like he's got almost 1 million subscribers. So it's not like us where we've got our small shows and our small group of people and we're comfortable with each other. These are people that, you never know who they are. And universally, there's always those people who do the one thing that's unforgivable to me, and that, well, I just can't even watch that woman. She's just clearly a liar. She shows all the earmarks of being a liar.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe what they're seeing in me is, I shaking thinking about it. And it's been 40 years ago.
Yeah.
In 2 months, it'll be 40 years. And I still shake when I think about it. And so I think that this is going to be a really good show because so seldomly do people actually get into the emotional aspects and the scars.
And I brought it up one night in chat on there and like, hey, nobody ever talks about that part of it. And I don't know what made me say that particular night, maybe something that happened that day or whatever. Maybe
Yeah.
I talked to a witness and just, I feel for them. I take in that energy that they're putting out a lot of times, and
That's
and
the thing I always zero in on. Like when I was writing for Cam, I would always try to dig into how did you feel about it?
mhm.
What did it make you feel? Were you afraid? Were you nervous? Did you feel at peace? Because everybody has different feelings about it. And there are people who actually feel at peace. I did not feel at peace. There wasn't an ounce of peace in my heart that day.
Well,
But
are you okay with kind of going over that? And the first time, or was that a first time encounter?
that was my
Or
one and only real encounter.
okay,
I mean,
that's
I've studied it since then. I'll tell you the encounter. I kind of had a feeling you were going to ask, so I kind of prepared myself.
okay,
I don't like being asked out of the blue because it does
right?
take me a little mental preparation.
Yeah.
But I kind of suspected you'd want me to share it.
And look, you don't have to. I mean,
Oh, no.
we can
I
because
prepared myself.
I
We're good.
totally understand.
But I will say this one. So I started out, I've always believed there was never a time in my life when I didn't think it was possible because yeah, Greg, that's exactly how I felt that. I thought I was going to die. And more importantly, I thought my children were going to die.
That's
But
not
I never didn't think that wasn't possible, but I never thought that it was possible where I was at. I had it in my head that you were going to either have to go to Boggy Creek, in Arkansas, or you were going to have to go to the Northwest. I had no idea. Had never even heard of a skunk ape at that point. And that is what makes even me, even now, say, maybe I had to have been on drugs or something. There's just no way. And I also feel like if I don't see another one before I die, I will never prove that I'm not crazy. And that's why I go out looking now. It has nothing to do with, I don't need to prove to anybody else but me. And I need to prove to myself that I am not crazy.
right.
And so with that said, my story is actually a 2-part story. I was married at a very, very young age to a man that we were just mismatched. He was 13 years older than me. There were so many things about our marriage that I was a street kid. I was literally living on the street. I was sleeping in the back seat of unlocked vehicles. I had an 18-month-old baby. I was shoplifting food for him. I was desperate, and there were limits to what I was willing to do to survive, and I was at those limits. And he offered to take me in and marry me, and I thought, oh, a home, someone to take care of me, and I married him. And it was all the wrong reasons, and it was just a horribly, horribly mismatched marriage. And that has a lot to do with how he reacted and how I reacted. And so when I tell my story, I hate it when people immediately hate him. I hate it when people immediately judge me. After 25 years, when our divorce was final, after 25 years, we had enough hate for each other in our hearts. We don't need to share that with other people. And believe me, we hated each other. But I was young. I was 19 years old. I was pregnant with his first child, my second. And we lived in this, I want to say cabin, but really it was just a shanty shack on the river. And it was up on, they built up high because it's on the Mississippi River, and it floods there. In fact, we eventually got flooded out of that cabin. And I cannot express how poor we were. We were just, the old saying, we were so poor we couldn't pay attention. And he was a hunter and a fisherman and not much of anything else. but he was very good at both of those things. And so he would run trot lines, and mainly that time of year, our income was he would hunt at night for raccoon pelts. And that's how we were basically getting by on that money. And back then, you could sell them for $25 a piece, and $25 a piece, you bring in, you go to the fur buyer, I think every Thursday night, and you come away with $200 or $300. And that was really good money back in the mid 80s. But the thing is that cabin had no telephone, and it sat way down on the river under the 280 bridge. If you get on Google Earth or whatever, and you find where Interstate 280 crosses the Mississippi River, on the upriver side of that bridge, on the Illinois side, is a field, and that cabin sat in that field. The cabin burned down. It's not there anymore. It burned down years ago, like 2 or 3 decades ago. But at the time, it sat right there, and there were a few other cabins that went up the river, but those were all, nobody lived in them in the wintertime. They were all summer use cabins. And he was out, so he would go out hunting, and because we didn't have a phone and I was pregnant, my best friend would come down, and she and I would sit in front of the fireplace, which was our only source of heat in that cabin, and we would play gin rummy. And I was sitting with my back to the wall, the outer wall, and she was sitting with her back to the kitchen wall. And we had my older son, who was not quite 3 at the time, was laying on a blanket and here, and the fireplace was here. We're just playing cards, and something hit the cabin really hard, and I mean bam, hard. In fact, we had this old hide-a-bed sofa, and it was the old-fashioned kind where all of the internal workings were iron, and it weighed a ton, but it didn't have legs on it, so we had it sitting on cement blocks, because otherwise you couldn't pull the bed out without it gouging the floor. And it was sitting up on these blocks, and the thing that hit the cabin knocked that heavy sofa off on its face on the floor. And until just about a year or so ago, maybe even 2 years ago, it never occurred to me that it probably hit it from underneath. I always thought it hit the outside wall because my back was to it. I just heard this big bang, and then the thunk of the sofa turning over. And but I think it must have been underneath the cabin, because the cabin sat up about 6 feet off the ground. And anyway, this happens, and of course I'm thinking somebody is down there trying to mess with us. And I had a 44 caliber pistol, and you have to forgive me. I've had this thing with, I feel like I've just got hairs all over my face lately.
We can't see them. I've got dog hairs all over me. So.
But I can feel them, like I
Right.
And they're like making my eyes itch and my nose itch. But anyway, so I grabbed and I don't know, I don't think it was 44. It might've been a 45. It was a Smith & Wesson. It was a black powder. Now they only make one or the other, and I have no idea because I'm not a gun person. But it was a big pistol, and it was black powder. And I went out on the porch, and the porch ran the whole length of the front of the cabin, between the cabin and the river, is a big, wide, screened-in porch. And I ran to this end, and I looked down the long set of stairs, and I couldn't see anything on this side, which would have been the side where it happened. And I ran to that end, and I looked down, and I didn't see anything over there. So all I could do, because we didn't have cell phones back then either, and I stuck the pistol up in the air, and I fired 3 times, and my Larry, my husband, came back to the cabin, and we told him what happened. Something hit the cabin hard enough that it knocked that sofa over. He had to help my best friend right it, because I couldn't, because I was big belly, pregnant. And so he went around and he looked, and it was like December. At the very earliest, it was late November, but coon season didn't even start until the middle of November. So it was definitely at least mid-November, but I think it was more like December. And he didn't find any tracks. Of course, the ground was frozen. This is, northern Illinois in wintertime. But he did see where it had a lattice skirting all around, and he did see where something had pulled that lattice off of there. And he said, well, something's been up under the cabin. And, every time I tell that, I think of, in you've seen the Legend of Boggy Creek, right? When the sheriff comes and he walks around and he says, you got a bobcat living under that cabin. And I'm thinking, there ain't no bobcat big enough to have reached up and knocked that sofa off. But I always think of that. But anyway, he didn't find anything. And I can't even honestly remember what excuse he made for that sofa falling over.
Yeah.
But one thing led to another, and he dismissed it. And he just said, well, you're a city girl. And in all honesty, I'm not a country girl. I wasn't raised in the country, but we always had horses, and we always had to keep them on the farm, and we always had to work on the farm in order to take care, pay for the horses. So
Right.
we were always, I did farm chores my whole life. And I spent all my time out in the country riding around on horses and trails and stuff. It's not like I had never been in the country. And my dad and my brothers were all hunters, and my grandfather were all hunters. So I learned to shoot a gun when I was 8 years old. And so I never felt like a full on city girl, but he, being a farmer, just saw me as, I may as well have been born in New York City.
Right.
And
New York City.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So that's
commercial.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was exactly what I was going for. So you got it. But anyway, after that, if I had to leave the cabin, I always made sure it was in daylight, and I always made sure I got home before dark. And this is the middle of winter, so it was not a big window. And if on the rare occasion that I did get home after dark, I would honk the horn and have him come out, walk me in. But we didn't live there much longer because there was an ice jam on the river and we got flooded out. And by the time March came along and I gave birth to my second son, we had been moved away from there about 3 months. Of course, because I believe, in Bigfoot, I floated it out there. I think that was a Bigfoot that did that. And of course, it's stupid to think that, because on the edge of civilization, and that's the big thing about it, it's not just that it was in Illinois. It's that we're talking, if you look at Milan, Illinois, and you look at this island, it's called Big Island. It's not really an island, but it's on the map as Big Island. And you look at it and you see how civilized. It hasn't grown up that much around there. It's still almost as deserted as it ever was, and it was never truly deserted. It's not like I was up in some mountain in the Northwest or up in northern Canada. This was right on the edge of civilization. And so I realize, looking back now, I probably did sound like an idiot then. But I didn't want to go back down there because my grandparents had lived on that island since 1951. I think they moved there. And this was 1985. And I can remember growing up at my grandma's house and her saying, you don't go to that end of the island. There's a wild man that lives there. Well, I didn't know as a kid that wild man was another word for a booger. I didn't know that. I thought there was some crazy old guy that lived, and maybe in a cabin somewhere, and like eating children or something. I didn't know.
Well, we've heard that before too, right? Since you have people talk to you. A lady moved in here from Florida in this county in the early 70s, and the neighbor kids on the way to school and on the bus said, "Hey, be careful playing in those woods over there. There's a hairy wild man."
Yeah.
And they saw it and found tracks and all that, and that's in this county. But you're talking in a time where the term Bigfoot may have not made it somewhere, maybe before that. There's people over in this county, y'all hear me talk about it all the time. They called them the big monkeys in the 40s because they
Yeah.
didn't know anything else to call them. So
Right.
that's
Yeah. And I didn't know that was a thing. I had no idea. I just know my grandma always told me, you
yeah.
stay off that end of the island, there's a wild man that lives there.
Wow. That gives
And
me
so
goosebumps.
anyway, we moved away from there. We lived in the house. My son was born. And my husband was a night fisherman. He liked to go sit on the riverbank and fish at night. I never fished that way. I grew up fishing from a boat in the middle of the day, but it was, what he did. And so when I married him, that's what I did. And he
Right.
wanted to go down to Big Island and fish. And I just did not want to go down there. And to be fair, I think what he was trying to accomplish was making me face my fear because he forced me to go down there and fish. And so across the road, it's the Mississippi River, and then the field with the house and the road that runs behind it. And then on the other side of that road, that's all backwater and swamps and marsh and everything. And it's not fun. But he pulled into this like teardrop shaped clearing. And it was just a real narrow, about 1.5 car wide little drive that you pulled in, and it opened up to like a teardrop. And it was at the end of a stretch of like a pond. And then there's all kinds of dikes and waterways there. And he took all of his fishing stuff and he went way down, and he left me in this teardropped
Oh no.
clearing with the kids. And I had a little fire, and I had my Coleman lantern, and I had a playpen for the baby, and that had mosquito netting that I draped over it, and he went to sleep right away. And it was me and my other son, who was 3 at that point, and I'm sitting here. It was like a 5-gallon bucket with like a seat attached to the top. And I'm sitting here, and now this backwater pond didn't have anything that I was going to fish for in it. It really didn't. It had what I call dogfish, but a lot of people seem to be confused by that. But
Mud
to
puppy.
me, a dogfish is just almost looks like a gar in a way. But
There's a thing here called it's a water dog.
it might be the same.
It's got it look like a catfish with the gills on out or the lungs on the outside, or
Kind of like a bowfish. You know what a
I guess-
bowfish looks like?
no, I think we're talking about 2 different things. This one looks like a salamander. It has 4 legs. Look it up. Look up a mud puppy or a water dog.
Oh, I know what a mud puppy is.
Yeah.
Now this is an actual fish. This looks kind of like a bowfin,
Okay.
but which is kind of a catfish, but it kind of had a more of elongated, almost like a spoonbill.
Okay.
But anyway, and so I wasn't really interested in fishing there, but I put my boy's fishing pole out, with the bobber, so he could feel like he was fishing. And I remember I cooked some hot dogs and I roasted some marshmallows for him. And I was just sitting there enjoying the night sky, because I'm one of those people that goes out in the middle of the night and stares at the sky all night and looks at the stars. Yeah,
Me too.
I find all the constellations and all of that. And so I was just sitting there enjoying it, and I heard a sound behind me, and I remember thinking, there aren't too many animals I don't know. I mean, when I hear them, they like a raccoon might startle the snot out of me if it starts, but I'll know after a second. I'll be, oh yeah, that's a raccoon. And I know squirrels, and I know rabbits, and I know, I don't think there's too many animals I don't know, but I can tell you the honest truth. Every time I hear a fox, it fools me, because every time I hear one, they sound different from the last time. And so I didn't know if I was listening to a fox or what I was, but I thought, man, that's a big, whatever it is, it's pretty damn big. And I think I originally probably thought it was just a raccoon, because, I was probably smelling the hot dogs and waiting for us to leave so it could raid the garbage or whatever. But I kept thinking, it's so big. it just sounds like somebody's back there rummaging around. And then it started making like and it wasn't a samurai chatter. I'm telling you, it was not samurai chatter, but it was a sort of a quiet little, I can't even mimic it. I wish I could. I've only heard one recording once that actually sounded like what I heard that night. But it sounded like it's back there kind of like just talking at me. And boy, now my heart's kind of, and I can feel it like even right now. I'm starting to get that like tense feeling in my chest. Is there somebody back there? Are they going to hurt? By the way, at this point, I had even put my 3-year-old in the pen because he gotten tired. And I had put him in the playpen with the mosquito netting over him, and I'd put his fishing pole away, and it was just me sitting there enjoying the night. And of course, you're sitting there and you're thinking, I was thinking about what had happened the winter before right across the road, and I couldn't identify what was behind me, and I was starting really to get in like nervous, tense. Like I can feel it now.
So, but it's a different feeling when you have your children with you.
Right.
You would have been scared.
It really is.
You would have been scared anyway. But
yeah,
as a mom, I've been same situation with my son. You're like, yeah, there's a fear, and then there's another type of fear. When you knew if it come between you and those kids, you would get in between whatever that was.
I would have given my life for them.
Right.
I would have.
Yep.
So the clearing was over to my left. And you could see through the clearing. It was just wide enough you could see through it. You could see, and I don't know if it was the lights from the bridge or if the moon might have been full that night, or just the reflection of the lights from the city off the water. But it was bright on the other side of that, from the, for whatever reason, that opening was fairly well illuminated. And I heard this thing, and it was coming around this way. And I looked, and I didn't want to look. But like you do one of these things, like it startles you.
Yeah.
And I was sitting down on this bucket, and a 5-gallon bucket's like what, this tall off the ground. And so you're looking up, and if anything, looking up is going to look bigger anyway. And I'm telling you, the over the years, this thing has just grown in my mind. But I saw something that was on 2 feet step across that driveway that was about 1.5 cars wide, and it did it in one step. I did not see a face. I did not see detail. I saw a silhouette against that illuminated background. And it was just huge. I mean, it was like, holy God. And it went into there was a row of trees that kind of went around that surrounded most of that little lake, except for where we were at. And it went through into those trees, into the underbrush and whatever. And it came out into the water, and I could hear it walking in the water. It was swishing in the water. Swish, swish, not splish, splish, splish like a 4-legged animal would do. Right. Swish, swish, swish. And I can remember I was looking down, and I'm staring at my lap, and I'm staring at the ground in front of me, and I'm thinking I could look up. I could see what it is. I could be all right. I'd just look up. But I could not make myself look up. I couldn't.
Did he know you were there?
I'm certain it knew I was there. I am absolutely.
I'm sorry.
That's a good one. He, I don't know, or she. I don't know if it was a male or a female. I'm certain that it knew I was there. I'm sure that it was chattering to try to make me go away, so it wouldn't have to go around me. It could just cross that clearing. But I could not look up. I could not. I wanted to. I think I did, but I knew what I was going to see. I absolutely knew what I was going to see.
That's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard researchers that have shows and they're all, of course, they haven't seen them like we have. So they're like, I want to see one. When it all comes down to it and that things are happening, I've had a few say they couldn't make themselves do what they needed to do to see it. It's not. And so y'all, let's back up. When she saw it, I'm picturing it in my mind. And
that's an image I picture in my mind every day of my life.
From the one I saw to the one I 95% sure I saw.
Yeah.
You can't explain with a description of height and size. You just you've got to see it. Once you see it, did you see on social media this week where the lady did the study and in the reports of people seeing Bigfoot or Sasquatch, the fear levels, they marked the fear levels, and the fear levels were it coincided with the size. The larger the size, the more fear level they reported.
Really?
And she said, now y'all would think that's okay. Well, that makes sense. She said, but here's what I'm looking at. Out of over 100 people that responded and we talked to, or they looked at the data, to fake that, all of these people that didn't know each other would have to get together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it just, and she said that I was looking
I
at
saw
that.
one that was 10 foot, so I'm going to have a fear level up here, but yours was only 6 feet. So you need to be down here. Yeah.
Oh, you ain't nothing. Yours is only 6 foot tall. You should have been out there with me and my youngins. But she was looking at that data that, and it just makes sense to us that the bigger something is, it's like if I walk into I've done this before, walked into a field, a black bull, I couldn't see him. We were frog gigging and he's right beside us and he's not happy. And I know how big he is because I knew what he was supposed to be in another field. The fear was so bad that I knew my truck wasn't big enough even if we got to it, I'm like, look.
I can remember my oldest son as a teenager. I wasn't there. I didn't get to see it, but apparently they were all crossing the field. I don't know what they were doing, but they were crossing the field. And one out ahead of them. And all of a sudden he turned around and he's barreling back at him. And all they heard as he was coming up was, "Bull!" By the time he got to him, he got "Bull!" And they all watched him whip by.
Yeah, you come with me. Yeah, and if you see me running, don't be asking like, what's the problem? Come where I'm going, and then I'll tell you later.
Exactly. Outrun you.
Oh yeah, well you can outrun me now for sure. So
I always take someone with me I can outrun.
Now yeah, that's the first rule. We have rules of Fight Club. We have rules of booger hunting too. Always be at least the middle runner. You don't be the slowest runner.
Yep.
My thing is, people are like, "Why are you up on the bank watching?" Oh, somebody's got to be able to call 911. Y'all, that's up. Chain comes loose, cuts all y'all in half. I've said that so many times. Like, what are y'all doing? But my friends were crazy.
I used to tell D.A. Roberts, you send me the link on your phone so I can track it where you drop it.
Yeah, that's right. Throw it.
Yeah.
Right when it's like point of no return, throw the phone.
Yeah, and I'll track it on mine, and I'll tell them where to find you. Yep. Or at least where they'll find your phone.
I'm that friend. I'll make sure to check 9 o'clock in the morning when I wake up. Yeah.
I'll drive. And I may not leave with you, but I'll drive.
And I appreciate you. Did your husband? Did he end up seeing it?
Mm-mm.
He never saw it.
No, what happened was it walked out to the middle there, and I could hear it stopped. And I've always kind of joked about it's not really funny, but I don't know if it was out there taking a bath or playing in the water or fishing or whatever it was doing, but it kind of stopped, and then it just continued on to the other end. And I think that pond was probably maybe on the outside 50 yards long. It was just a long, narrow stretch of water. And it got out at the other end, and I never heard from it again. I mean, it didn't call, it didn't write. It's you know, it was like one night stand, wham bam, thank you, ma'am. But it was what happened was, as soon as I knew it was gone, I went into overdrive. I put out the fire, and I packed up I put out the lantern, and I put the kids in the back seat of the car, and I packed up the playpen and the cooler and the lantern and my bucket and the fishing gear. And I jumped in the car and I honked the horn 3 times, which was supposed to be my husband's indication to come back. And he said he never heard the horn. And I've never probably made that clear. He said he did not hear the horn, and that's not fair that people think that he deliberately didn't come back.
Yeah.
But he didn't until daylight. And what happened was, after he 2 or 3 times of honking the horn, I realized he had the keys. I couldn't even drive out. I was just trapped there with my kids. And I locked, it was hot July night, but I locked all the doors, and I rolled up the windows, and I just sat in that car with my kids. And by the time he did show up at about daybreak, I was about half out of my mind.
Well,
and
can I say something right quick?
Sure.
For people that are listening and they're like, well, wait a minute. And I'm on your side, Neoma. I'm not there. Wait a minute. That scared her to death. And she put out the fire, and look, Heather can tell you, when that one jumped out and screamed at us in that field that night, I was terrified.
Yeah.
But we've been taught to do certain things. My son had the rifles ready, and I put the fire out. We were putting things up. I couldn't just abandon and burn down half the county, And even though we were scared, we had to do that before we just left it. So I'm sorry. I've been where you're at.
Interesting that you said that, because it's never occurred to me why wouldn't I have put out the fire? I mean, the bucket was right there. All I had to do was dump the water on it.
Look, when you're tore up,
right. And I don't know about you, but when I'm scared, it's best that I'm doing something.
Focus on something else.
Yeah. Right. And my thoughts were, I need to get out of here. And to do that, I need to take everything with me.
Yeah.
What, of course, my story, and this goes to what we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, is that my husband and his friends, they made fun of me because I was like, see, I told you back in December or November, whatever it was, this was a Bigfoot, and now I can prove it because I saw it. And they're like, you didn't see that. Apparently I saw a bunny rabbit cross that road. I don't know what they thought, but they made fun of me, and to the point that I quit getting to go fishing at night with them because they weren't going to take the scaredy cat and have to deal with that BS.
Right.
And so here's my level of conceit. I don't have a whole lot going for me in this world. I was never a great beauty. I never had a great body. I'd never, I'm not a real outgoing person, but I'm smart, and I'm kind of proud of being smart. It's what I have going for me. And one thing I do know is that I was smarter than my husband and his friends. They were a bunch of drunken idiots. And
just took a little while to figure it out.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe that's what the Bigfoot was doing for you.
Yeah, there you go. It really bothered me that these idiots were calling me stupid.
Exactly.
And
yeah,
so I shut down, and I didn't ever talk about it with anybody for years. In fact, I was really surprised, even probably about a year and a half ago, my youngest of my 3 brothers, he's a minister, and there's been a lot of question about, these things being Nephilim and stuff like that. And so he called me up, and, and he's kind of really developed an interest in the topic. And he was asking me things, what do I know about it? And he said, well, why did you even get into this topic? And I was like, well, because of what happened back in 1985. And he says, okay. And I said, what do you mean, okay? He says, I don't know what happened in 85. And I was really surprised to realize that he had never heard me tell my story. But that is how, I mean, my sister had heard it. My kids grew up hearing it. I think my parents knew, but they've been dead for years, so who knows? But it surprised me that I had shut down so much on it that my own brothers had never heard me tell my story. They had no idea.
And we hear that all the time. My son,
Yeah.
the first time he ever heard any part of my story, he was around 14 or 15, and he never would have heard it then if he hadn't been playing the How on YouTube on his phone.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about finding Bigfoot. He was watching it because honestly, he was watching Mountain Monsters and he thought it was funny because they were faking everything.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, and I just wasn't interested because but he played that How. I never had heard that before. I had heard it before, but I was like,
but yeah.
wait, what is that? And that's how that train got to rolling or whatever. But I didn't tell him. There's a lot of people that I didn't tell. I had a man come to me. I hunted with him, and he was ex-frogman from Vietnam, the original SEALs.
Mhm.
He taught me a lot. He took me hunting. I don't know why he liked me, but this guy would have handmade moccasins. He would make his own bow. He'd make his own arrows, and he would hunt even during deer season like that. Now he had guns, but so he was teaching me things, and he came to me one day. I never had told him. I respected the heck out of him. I wasn't scared of him, but I probably needed to be. But he leaned in real close at the store where nobody else could hear him. He said, Roger, I was in my blind the other morning about 3 a.m. Now, when I say blind, this is a stick structure that he has built for himself, right? All natural. He said, I was in there, I was sitting still, and he was probably sitting with his legs crossed. He said, something reached in the back of my blind,
Jesus,
grabbed my backpack and pulled me. And this guy was about 225 and about 6'1", pulled me to the back of my blind with one hand and let go.
Wow.
Now, I'm sitting here thinking, should I tell him what I saw just 3/4 of a mile? I'm like, I didn't know whether to tell him or not. And I'm like, well, Max, I believe you because I saw something years ago so I won't go any further than that. Y'all are going to hear these stories later, but for him to come to me and tell me in a quiet way. And then I found out later that the guy that hunted over there, they had an encounter also. And they said, after that happened, he told us about it. Every time we went up there, he's up there watching. And it does something to you.
Yeah.
You don't know. People say, why do you go out? And, I don't know. Peyton wants to see one. Heather thinks she wants to see one. My days of getting out there might be gone with this hip and knee, but I will continue to give people, if I can, a platform to share these stories. Because while you've been talking, we've had people reliving some of their things too. Ha-ha's back. That's what all the young'uns call her.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back.
I had to let the dogs out. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Naomi, I'm sorry if I interrupt you, but when people say things that hit me, like I've been there, I've held it in, and that goes with the feelings of this stuff.
Don't ever apologize for interrupting, because this is a conversation.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear an interview. They want to hear a conversation. They want to be involved in the conversation. And when we talk back and forth like that, this is good. This is us being able to just talk and share. And we don't have television cameras in front of us.
And nobody's here to tell us how we got to do it. Right.
Right.
So, and that's what I'm like, oh, look, if you'll come on the show, I promise you, it'll be like sitting on the back porch drinking tea, or you can grab a beer or whatever. I don't care. But it's comforting. I do feel the emotions that people, but it's comforting to me because people ask me on shows and I'll tell them the paranormal stuff that has happened. I don't know why. I've been looking at all this, the blood type and all this stuff, trying to figure out why me. But sometimes in my head, I'm telling a story and I'm recounting it exactly how it happened, trying to paint the picture. You do a great job of that. Trying to paint a picture with words. And I'm in my head, I'm like, Roger, you sound about crap crazy. You need to stop. Stop. But I'm telling what happened. Heather, I don't know how much weird stuff she had happen in her life before she met me, but she's had enough now, and I'm glad she was there, because if I told the story and I didn't have witnesses, people like, oh, there he goes again. But I don't know. So have you figured out why? Now, when you did say something, when I talked to, this guy, Smith at the LBL, fishes all the time. Is it Mike?
Yeah.
Is it Mike? Mike. He's the teacher. I don't know if you met him, but I think he knows Wayne. And he said the first time he ever saw one, or those two, they were on the bank cooking hot dogs.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
so maybe there's something about, burnt
maybe
energy.
there's something about hot dogs.
Yeah. Heather, you are muted.
I just was saying the hot dogs drew him in. Maybe.
Yeah, that's right. Watch that char, y'all.
You know what was really scary though was that the whole time that was going on, I was sitting here, my car was here, my kids were right behind me in the playpen, sleeping, and it wasn't until like 2014. So we're talking, what is that? 29 years later?
I can't do math.
Yeah, 85, 95, 05. Yeah, 29 years later. I was listening to a show. I think it was
Art Bell.
Oh, that Wes Germer show. I can't think of what it's called. But anyway, I was listening to it, and he was talking about a story about a kid who called the Bigfoot the Cowman. And it was up in Washington. His dad worked for he was a logger. And they had gotten this house from his boss had rented him this house, and it was out in the middle of nowhere. And it was the mom and the kid that was there all day by themselves, and the dad would go off working in the logging company with the boss. And when apparently this thing had tried to lure the kid away. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of the possibility that they steal children. And of course, then when I heard that, I started studying about Native lore, where they talk about them stealing women and children and things like that. And it occurred to me 29 years later that my children were behind me. And that thing could have snuck up and taken them out of the playpen, and I wouldn't have heard it, because they can be very stealthy. That brought every horrible thought in my head right back to the surface. And 11 years after that, I am still trying to justify what a horrible mother I must have been not to think of my children while it was back there making that noise.
Look, these things scramble your brain, and people always say they're like, the first thing I saw. Well, I know you're full of crap, because the first thing you saw was everything, and you can't take it all in at once. And so it messes you. You're like, people say, well, what was you thinking? I said, well, I probably was thinking, should I run? I think I was froze to the ground, but I was shocked. What were you feeling? I was just shocked. I mean, because of course we go with the size, that's the first thing. But
that is the thing. And nobody will ever truly understand how big these things are until they see one.
Even the little
because
ones, y'all.
it's just big in every direction.
Yeah,
It's just,
it is. You're right. That's perfect. That's perfect. I've never heard that before, but you're right. It's
yeah.
big everywhere in every direction.
And
Sorry,
it
y'all.
don't matter what direction you're. I mean, you can look at it from every angle. That thing's just big.
Yep.
And
Oh, and
now,
you had a silhouette shot too, so
yeah,
you got the thickness from the chest to the back, and
I mean, he could have been walking sideways across,
That's
like
right.
doing this. I don't know, because he was
Yeah.
just broad. He was huge.
Oh my
Or
God!
she. I don't know if it was male or female.
And look, y'all, we laugh about this. We can laugh now because we made it through it.
Did it
I
just
wanted
look
to-
black or dark, or could you tell there was hair? Was there hair hanging off?
The silhouette that I saw was, I'm guessing. You know what? If anything that I say at this point would be me adding, you know how like
Yeah.
your mind wants to fill in the blanks.
Right.
And I've done a really good job over the years of not letting my mind do that, so that I can give the most honest report that I can. And I'm going to say I didn't get enough. It was a silhouette, which of course would have been black, because the land behind it, or the river behind it, was sort of an illuminated blue.
Let me ask you this.
Davenport, Iowa was directly across the river.
So was the silhouette from the feet up to the head, or was it waist up to the head, or knees?
I don't know that I actually saw its feet, but I saw it at least from the knees up.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at, because people, when you say something was huge, well, one thing, when you lock in on something for 2 seconds, let's say you see a gap in the step, and you can see through there.
Yeah,
we don't do that.
No.
If I'm running, maybe, but
the 17 degree, I believe is what it's called, the 17 degree angle in how they walk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe a human ever lifts their leg more than 17 degrees from the ground, and they do almost 90. Yeah. And so when it stepped across, I had a clear, light here.
Right.
So I probably should have been able to tell if it's male or female, but there wasn't nothing dangling, so I don't know.
Well, and the step across. No, you're good. The step across too is the distance that you don't have to have the measurements.
Yeah.
Personally, to know something was big. If I see a bull that's 600 pounds versus 1,600, I don't have to tell you, oh, let me weigh him and see he's way bigger, So
right.
Anyway, people, they lock in on the statistics, and they want to know, and I understand that.
Yeah, and I would love to have been able to give. When my kids were little, the only outlet I had for telling the story and getting it out of my system is my boys. Every year at the end of the school year, they'd have a camp out, and they would invite their friends over out to the farm, and we'd build a big bonfire, and they always loved it. They all called me mama. To most of them to this day still call me mama. And they all loved it when mama would come down and sit around the campfire and tell them stories. And I would tell the story, but of course I would, just exaggerate, and, and it growled at me and it scared me really bad. And, and I was so terrified. And the kids just loved that. And so that was the only outlet I had, and which is why my kids knew the story, because I would tell this exaggerated story. But in my head, I've always had to tell myself, you have to keep the real facts that you can identify as being true separate from that, because if somebody ever asks me, the worst thing that, anybody that's a cop will tell you, and I know that there are cops here, right? Will tell you that people are unreliable witnesses, because if you ask them a question and they don't know the answer, their imagination will fill it in for you. And so I try not to let that happen.
Right. And me too. Well, what the face look like? Y'all, I just told you it was 170 yards. How in the hell am I going to see a face? But
I noticed he had a big old pimple right here.
Yeah. You leaving, Heather? Are you hanging there? You're
muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, I'm trying. trying. I was just waving at people that were saying hi,
Oh,
but
Oh.
yeah,
okay.
it's a little line, very small. So I don't know how long I'll last, but I'll switch to my phone and be on chat.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll kick you out right now so you don't run it all the way down.
All right,
All right. Love
Well,
you.
it was
bye,
good to
y'all.
see you.
Good to see
Bye-bye.
you.
Can't
See you at
wait.
the LBL again sometime soon, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, at our cabin, not in a tent.
Okay, well, that's all right. I'll come sleep on your couch.
There you go. You're welcome. All right. Bye, Heather.
Bye.
All right. So let me
I-
tell you, let me say something that might scare you a little bit. And it don't mean it's true. But anytime I've ever heard anybody talk about the chatter, there was more than one.
Yeah, I have thought about that. I
'Cause
can
they're-
only tell you for sure that there was one.
exactly. Yeah.
But I
By the flickering campfire, tales come alive of a creature in the shadows where legend